Reichlin, and just to start by thanking each and every one of you for coming tonight. And I hope that the movie alone was worth coming for. Can I just see by show of hands, just before I go any further, who in this room comes from a family that was in Lithuania, a descendant of a Lithuanian? Let me just see. That's amazing. Almost Belarus? Okay, well it depends where in Belarus. Where was your family from in Belarus? Zhetel. So Zhetel was actually, I think the Chofetz Chaim was born in Zhetel, and then afterwards he went to Radin. Exactly, in the Dubna Magib. So that was part of Greater Lithuania. The borders of Lithuania as they are today weren't the same as they were before. So when you saw Mir and Volozhin, for example, that is now in Belarus, but that was part of Lithuania at one point. In fact, there's a nice story told about a Jew in Vilna who was in Vilna when Vilna was under Polish rule. So sometimes the border would move. Kovna became the capital, and Poland then became, I beg your pardon, Vilna became incorporated into Poland. And this big, tough, anti-Semitic Polak comes up to me and he says, "Zhit, Vilna is in Poland." He didn't want to argue with this big guy. He said, "Oh, thank God, I couldn't stand those Lithuanian winters." So I just want to open by saying that it's beautiful to be in the World Mizrachi offices here in Jerusalem. I have a personal hakarata tov to express to Soli Sachs, who is sitting in front of me, of the 16 tours that World Mizrachi organized over the last 16 years. I participated in 14. And the only reason that I didn't participate in 16 was that the one was to South Africa, which I've been to before, and the other one was to Spain, which I'd been to the year before. But otherwise, I was literally on every single one of those World Heritage Tours of Mizrachi, and really, Soli, I want to thank you because it's made a major difference to my life, and lovely to see Gita here tonight as well. And also, once again, to quell in the nachas that Harav Doron Peretz has taken over the reins, and to wish him bracha and hatzlacha. And what a privilege to have a man like this as one of our leaders, and please God he should continue to make even a greater contribution to Klal Yisrael. So, is anybody in a rush? I plan to speak for about an hour and a half, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just a few minutes. Bivon? No loo break. Is anybody in the Taka wants to have a... Okay, you can, okay, I won't be long. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the trip itself and a little bit about Lithuania and what it is that drives me about these heritage tours. So I'm going to relate a story that happened to me when I was in Portugal. I went to Lisbon, and we went to the shul in Lisbon on Shabbat. And there were 3 guys, young men, that were standing a little bit to the side, and we kind of filled the antechamber of the shul with our group. And I looked at the guys and I thought, there's something interesting going on over here. I've got a little bit of a journalist's eye, and I walked up to them and I asked them what they were doing, and they said, we're non-Jewish. And we're all Magairim because the rabbi in the shul runs a Giyur program. And I said, where are you from? The one guy said, I come from Brazil. The other one said that he came from a little town on the border of Spain and Portugal. And the third guy said that he came from a place called Maputo in Mozambique. He's Portuguese and he's on the border, the northern border of South Africa. And I said, Landsman, we come from the bottom of Africa, and I was delighted to see a fellow African. And I said to him, what's your story? So he said, I was always feel that I was a Jew. He said it slightly differently. I was always feel that I was a Jew. And he said that he decided to go to Portugal because in Portugal the rabbi could speak Portuguese, and there's an incredible organization called Shavei Yisrael that sends these rabbanim out on shlichut all over the world, and they specifically talk to the Spanish and Portuguese Jews. And he started the Giyur program, and then he went back to Mozambique, and he said that he went to talk to his great-grandmother, Esther Cardoza. Oh, now I'm talking to a very educated audience, because the reason that you reacted was for 2 reasons. First of all, Esther is clearly a Jewish name, and second of all, Cardoza is a typical Marano name, one of the Anusim that we call the Anusim, and clearly they were from the Anusim that had left Portugal in 1498, right? The Inquisition in Spain was 1492. They went over the border into Portugal until 1498, and they were expelled from there as well. And he said to her this, he said to this granny when she, she used to take him to church every Sunday morning in Maputo. She wore a long black coat and a big tsalem on her chest. And she always used to take him to church, and he used to mumble some words in a language which he couldn't understand. It wasn't Portuguese. And he pointed to his head and his heart and both sides of his chest. And when he said to her that day, when he got back to Maputo, he said that I'm going to convert, she nearly fainted on the spot. She became pale, she started like shuddering, and she said to him, "Are you mad? They're going to burn you." What was happening here, ladies and gentlemen? What was happening here was that after 4 centuries, embedded in her brain and her DNA was that deep fear of auto de fe. They used to burn the Jews at the stake in Portugal and Spain, and here's this woman sitting in Africa, practicing Catholicism, that hears that her great-grandson is going to Magaya, and she says, God forbid they will burn you at the stake. When he went back to Maputo, he was sitting in a shiur of the Rav, and the Rav said that there was a phrase that the Portuguese, that the Maranas used to say in Ladino, which was the Spanish Yiddish, God is in my head, God is in my heart, I do not believe in the stones and the sticks to which I'm about to pray. And that's what his grandmother had been saying and told him to say. Why am I telling you the story? I'm telling you the story because I believe deeply that we carry within each of us the memories, the feelings, the experiences that our people have experienced for thousands of years. And we keep it in a collective memory that it is imprinted deeply on our souls and in our DNA. And I believe that we cannot fully grasp who we are, what our motivations are, and our hopes and our dreams without coming to terms with where we come from. I was reading a book about the great-grandfather of Hannah Wallace this afternoon. And her book was known as the Avraham Avinu of Australia. He brought Yiddishkeit to Australia. And he quoted Rav Yitzchak, Yosef Yitzchak, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe of Liadi. And he said over there that a person, he said it's a mitzvah and an obligation for a person to study their roots. He says because it's in order to understand the shoot from which roots you come and the rock from which you have been hewn. I thought that's an amazing, amazing phrase that I read this afternoon. And that's what this is all about. You know, on Monday night we spoke in Modi'in, and there was a man that sent an email to the lady that coordinated the evening and said, what are you talking about Der Heim? Der Heim is Israel. Der Heim is not Lithuania. And immediately, it's like quite a shocking thing to say. And then I thought about it afterwards, and I said, you know what? Do you remember what Tevye said in Fiddle on the Roof? He's right. And he's right. He's taka right. It's not our home. This is our home. Eretz Yisrael is our home. Even though I have a house in Glen Hazel, Yom Echad, please God, Lalot La'aretz. We're coming. All of us are coming. This is home. Israel is home. But it hasn't always been our home. It's not even 70 years that this is our home. For thousands of years, home was the Galut. And there was a reason that we were there, and there was an experience that we went through as a Jewish people that is not a coincidence. Ein mikra ba'olam, we said earlier. Hashem spread us to the 4 corners of the world, and as I was reading this afternoon, in Hasidus there's this idea that there are nitzotzos, there are sparks all over the world that have to be revealed, and that's what Abraham Avinu was doing in Australia. But there is a reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us into the world and put us in all the diaspora communities in order that we integrate and we take from the diaspora things which are needed for our growth as people. And this is to come to terms with who we are and where we were. Just need to tell you a couple of interesting things quickly. The first thing is we saw about Sugihara in Kovna. So Sugihara saved 2,000, he wrote out 2,000 passports, him and his wife wrote 2,000 passports within 3 to 4 weeks. I was reading recently, and you know these things are amazing. The more you read, the more you uncover the most incredible things. They were writing passports day and night to the extent that his hands became swollen, and he couldn't use his hands because he was signing visas at such a pace and so many per day that his wife used to massage his hands at night so that he can continue writing and signing visas. He was signing visas on the train as people were leaving Kovna, as he was leaving Kovna because the Japanese government called him back. He was signing visas and passing them through the windows to the Jews as he was walking out the station. An amazing thing happened. I connected with his son Nabuki on Sunday morning when I was here in Israel. I traced him on the internet and he's in Antwerp. Who is Nabuki Sugihara? When that man that I spoke about in the DVD went to look for Sugihara in Japan, and thank God got him, I think 2 or 3 years before he died, and he asked him what the Jewish people could do. Sugihara refused to take anything, and as you heard, he said, why? Because do what is right, because it is right, and leave it alone. I didn't do this for schar, I did this purely l'shem shamayim. But they prevailed upon him, and he said, you know what, I haven't got the money, because he was destitute. The Japanese government expelled him from the foreign service, and he was destitute. He had nothing for the rest of his life, from the age of about 40. He said, I'd like you to educate my one son, Nabuki. And Nabuki was brought to Jerusalem, and he was educated at the university in Jerusalem, and he became an engineer, and his studies for 4 years were paid by the descendants of those that had survived because of Sugihara. And I've now traced him to Antwerp. I'm in communication with him. So this is history that's unfolding before our eyes. A few months ago, I was in Ramat HaSharon, and I met Soli Ganor. He's still alive, Blian Hara, 89 years old. I phoned him yesterday morning to touch base with him, and I hope to go and visit him tomorrow or Thursday before I go back. Soli Ganor was an 11-year-old boy in Kovna that gave away his pocket money to those Polish refugees that were streaming over the border from Poland into Lithuania in 1940. He was desperate to go and see a Laurel and Hardy movie. Isn't it significant that I'm talking to you about Laurel and Hardy? All of us know Laurel and Hardy. So when we think of the Shoah as being some distant place on earth and some faraway place in a distant era that we can't even connect to, I'm talking about Laurel and Hardy. I'm talking about Soli Ganor, who lives in Ramat HaSharon. He was an 11-year-old boy, couldn't get to the movie, went to his auntie's shop, who had a smart delicatessen in Kovna, to ask her, because he couldn't ask his parents, and he didn't want to tell them that he had given away his pocket money to tzedakah, to ask her to give him 1 lit to go to the movie. She was busy with a customer, and he saw a man standing there that had just walked into the shop with a beautiful coat, a tall, elegant man with Asian eyes. And he remarked afterwards, I was struck by his kind eyes. So this tall man, who happened to be whom? Chuene Sugihara, said to this little kid there, why are you waiting here? So he said, because that's my auntie, she owns the shop, and I want some money from her to go to a movie. So he said, how much is the movie? He said, 1 lit. So he took out 2 lit from his pocket, and he gave it to Soli, and Soli said to him, I can't accept this from you. He said, why not? He said, because you're not my family. I can't accept money from a stranger. So he said, you know what? Call me uncle. And here's the 2 lit. So he said, look, if you're my uncle, tonight is Hanukkah. I want you to come to our home to celebrate Hanukkah. And Chuene Sugihara and his wife Yukiko went to have a Hanukkah meal with the Ganors in Kovna. I'm telling you a story that happened in 1940. Chuene Sugihara came across Jews for the first time in his life. And there was a man from Poland, a family member of the Ganors, that was sitting at the Hanukkah table, and he told them about the desperate situation of the Jews in Poland. And he was crying. But at the same time, and at other times of the evening, there was simcha, there were the candles, they were eating all the rich foods that one normally associates, the latkes that one associates with Hanukkah. And in the documentary which I saw where they interviewed Yukiko Sugihara, blessed memory, she was saying, I couldn't believe how rich the food was and how much there was. And that there was so much noise around the table when people were eating, and you just kind of saw the stark contrast between our Jewish culture and Japanese culture. But Sugihara was listening very carefully, because why was he in Kovna? He was actually spying on the Germans. The interesting thing is, and history is full of these interesting things, that the Japanese were actually allies of the Nazis, if you recall. So what was he doing spying on the Germans? Because that's what friends do in politics. They spy on each other, isn't that right? So he was sending reports back to Japan about how the Germans were moving and advancing across Eastern Europe, and they were moving from Poland to Lithuania, etc., etc. And he sat and he listened and he watched. And he had a very intimate experience with Jews in their home on a Chag. It was 4 or 5 months later that boys in the Mir Yeshiva found out that they could get an entrance visa into Curacao through the Dutch consul, provided that they could get an exit visa from Sugihara in the Japanese consul. Sugihara cabled Japan 3 times. I organized an evening with the Japanese ambassador in Johannesburg to celebrate the life of Sugihara and thank Sugihara Tsukuzund, and to celebrate Sugihara's life and to thank him for what he had done. I'm sure everybody knows Rabbi Yossi Goldman of the Sydenham Highlands North Shul, Rabbi Levi Weinberg of Chabad. There's a Rabbi Ehrman at Or Sameach. His wife her father was a Shmuel Orlansky. She was an Orlansky. All of their fathers were saved by Sugihara. We paid tribute to him, and I went to see the Japanese consul, an amazing human being. He showed me copies of the cables that were sent by Sugihara from Kovne in 1940 to Japan, and they did not allow him to, they didn't respond positively. And he said, these people have committed no crimes. The only thing that they're guilty of is that they're Jews, and that's nothing to be guilty of. Let's start writing out the visas without their permission. And that's what literally wrote him off for the rest of his life as far as his income was concerned. I met Soli Ganor. Here's an 11-year-old boy that invites the Japanese consul to his parents' home on Hanukkah 1940. And within months, the same Japanese man is faced with Jewish refugees outside. Isn't this crazy? We talk about ein mikra ba'olam. But that's what I do. I fly all over the world and I read in order to, I believe, mine these nuggets of magnificent Jewish history to say that we're living in a world with hashgacha pratit. Nothing happens by coincidence. And the more we find out about our ancestry, where we came from, the things that happened, the more we understand who we are as Jews, we see our destiny in a greater context. World Mizrachi moves very much towards the future, but you cannot move towards the future without appreciating where we've come from. So these are just a couple of anecdotes which I hope just gives you an indication as to why I do what I do and why it would be lovely if other people could join us on these journeys of discovery. Were there any observations or questions that you have about things that you saw? Did anybody feel that surrealism when we were in the Rumbala forest with the birds chirping and you're seeing a place of... Where was that? That was Rumbala, which is the forest outside of Riga. And did you hear that train coming past? We didn't add that sound. As we were standing in the forest, a train came past, which is what? That's how the Jews were taken to Punar and Rumbala, because they had train routes running right past. Why was Auschwitz the most effective place for the Nazis to exterminate, I don't like to use that word, murdered the Jews? Because it was a railway junction that linked all sorts of cities all over the world, but not all over the world, all over Europe. And they came through Auschwitz, and that's why that was the place. If I can just say, while you're thinking, I can see that there are a few more observations or questions or things to share. I'm going to come to you now. I just want to say that when we take, with this particular journey that we take to Riga, to Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus, is not focused on the Holocaust as such. If you go to Poland, there's certain trips that you go to Auschwitz, you go to places of mass extermination. What we want to do is, of course, you can't go to any of the Baltic states without, of course, recognizing the Holocaust, and that's really where it came to an end in many respects. However, what we try and do, and which I think we're doing successfully, is giving an overview of the whole of the Lithuanian Jewish experience. We talk about the secular Zionists, we talk about the religious Zionists, where Rav Reines came from, how Rav Kook came from, how their philosophies developed. We look at the Yiddishists, we look at the Bundists, so that we also understand that whole direction and political development within the Jewish people. And of course we look at the Yeshivot. So we try and look at the entire spectrum of what was the experience of Jews in Eastern Europe. Yes, sir.
My name is Michael Gentilowitz. I just want to thank the organizers for this fascinating evening, especially to Roy, who a month ago had another event on Lithuanian Jewry. What I think is important to mention is that this month, September, October, will be the 75th anniversary of the murder of the Jews of Lithuania. I know my family, your tours unfortunately don't cover the north of Lithuania. My family comes from the border of Lithuania and Latvia, from an area called Janešik, They come from the town of Kruk, and what is important, on Yom Kippur in 1941, the Jews of Kruk, that means the Jankelowitz family, the Klein family, and the Schwartz family, they were all marched out of Shul during Winter Tanatokev to Zager. They marched on Yom Kippur to Zager, and the day after Yom Kippur, they were all murdered in the pits that they had dug. And I think it's important to remember this 75 years ago.
Thank you, Michael. If I may mention, when you said we don't go to the north of Lithuania, I think this is a key element which, if not for your question, we might have forgotten to address. The design of the tour is as follows. We land in Riga, we spend one day in Riga. That's when we go to the ghetto in Riga, we see where the shul was in Riga, etc., the Jewish quarter, and then we look at Rumela. We then go over the border, and we go through the center of Lithuania, starting in the north and really exiting in the south. And on that trip, you're seeing Ponevezh, Kovna, Shabbos in Vilna, then over the border into Belarus for the rest of the trip. Now, anybody that wants to go to the shtetl of their forebears, so if you, for example, wanted to go to Janešik, or you wanted to go to Zaga, when we're on the same latitude as we're traveling on the coach, when we're on the same latitude as the shtetl that cross that region, you get collected by a taxi driver with a private guide. It's a separate cost, not an enormous cost. They take you out to your shtetl, you take your photographs, you find what you want to find, and then you link up later with us, later that day with us on the bus. So nobody misses anything, and you do your micro investigations on the side, and then you do the macro with us. The other thing is that we have a number of genealogists that we work with in Eastern Europe, and if you send the information to them before, starting from now and going forward, so they will do an initial search for free. If they come up with a blank, you don't pay. If they hit something and they say there's information, then you negotiate with them, they do the research for you, so that by the time you get there, you've got your research, you've got your private guide organized, transport, and you can do everything. See the big spots and also pursue your own personal family history. So,
just a couple of things. My great-grandparents on father's side, born in Czechoslovakia, Polish, came to England in 1893, and we thought that that was it. The family had gone, departed. Never heard about anybody else. However, some years ago,
stand forward.
Yeah. Some years ago, I just come back from a trip overseas. My daughter is the director of the Broad Jewish Cultural Center in Tel Aviv. And she had a visitor, somebody who came in, a woman of about 45, 50, who said that she'd been to Yad Vashem and she'd seen that all the members of her family, whom she knew had been killed in the Holocaust, the information had been supplied by a certain Dr. Gabriel Siran. Are you related? She said yes. It turned out that she was a long-lost relative of ours, whose parents had been partisans in the forests, had survived the war, had gone back and lived there in Jettel, and then moved to America. She later told me that the worst thing they ever did was to go to America, not to come here, because their family were all married out. One more thing I wanted to say. A few years ago, 2013, my son, who was very much into roots, suggested that we should do a trip to Eastern Europe. And for 2 days we had a hire car. We went all over Belarus. And this is just the one thing I want to finish with. The first stop when we drove out of Minsk was Volozhin. And I said, I wonder where the yeshiva would be. And we looked and we couldn't see anything. I thought, maybe it's disappeared. And then he said, look, there's an office there, tourist office, cultural center. Let's ask. At the time, my Russian was still not too rusty, so I was able to talk to her. And the woman in charge, and I said to her in Russian, I said, where is the Еврейская Academia? And she said, Jewish Academy? You mean the yeshiva?
Thank you. Thank you. There are just two things I want to quickly extract from that, and then we're going to wrap up. The one was the mention of the partisans. We met Professor David Katz in Vilna, and we will hope to... You've heard of him? You've met him? Yeah. So David Katz you saw over there with a big beard, etc., etc. What's it? Rasputin. That's right. That's right. Lahavdil, Elephant Balok. So he was the professor of Yiddish at Oxford University for 18 years, and he also was a visiting professor at Yale for a year, a top, brilliant academic. He is fighting the Lithuanian government virtually single-handedly. Why? Because they have adopted in Lithuania a double genocide policy or theory. Have you heard of this double genocide? If you have a look at defendinghistory.com, you'll see this conversation. What they did was they laid charges against 2 Jewish women in Vilna that were part of the partisans. And they said that they collaborated with the Russians in attacking the Lithuanians. So what is going on with this attempt at rewriting and revisionist history that's going on in Eastern Europe? What they're trying to say is as follows. You Jews were victims of the Nazis. We were victims of Russian imperialism. And you Jews joined our enemy against us. So we see you as war criminals. Why are they doing this? Because they want to draw an equivalence. You were victims and we were victims, so let's call it quits. So it was absolutely fascinating to talk to David Katz, who actually got 71 members of the European Parliament to sign a declaration distancing themselves from this policy. So the battle to protect our history is very much alive and well and going on right now. That we have to protect ourselves against this disinformation. And I believe that the more first-hand information we have about what's going on helps us to stand up to these anti-Semites and make sure that these things are not freely available to pollute the world media. One more question and then I think we're going to wrap up. Sir, at the back.
Me?
Yes? Do you want to come forward maybe?
Sorry? Yeah, sure.
So if I can just ask that, it's a very brief observational question. Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Larry Pfeffer. I was born in Hungary, not in Lithuania. Now in Hungary, you said that there's a problem with this equivalence, and I think that we should really look at history truthfully, not propaganda. In Hungary, for example, was a second Bolshevik state. Who was it led by? By a Jew. Béla Kun called himself Béla Kun. 2/3 of the Politburo were Jews. They're not Jews like you and I, they were communist Jews, but they were of Jewish origin. They instituted the Red Terror in Hungary in 1990. It was followed by a White Terror. When I was a child in Budapest, the leading communist murderers were of Jewish origin. Mátyás Rákosi, whose name was Mátyás Rosenfeld. The head of the KGB was Péter Gábor. He was born as Benjamin Heisenberg. The number two in the party was called Gerő Ernő. For one time I think he was prime minister. He was born as Ernő Zinger. And one more thing that we have to say is that there was a communist genocide which actually was greater than the Shoah. According to the Black Book of Communism by Harvard Press, about 94 million people were killed by the communists. So we cannot just say that things didn't happen with communist Jews. That would be false.
Thank you. I think that it's important. I think that's an important point, and that there are complexities in Jewish history. I must just tell you as an aside related to the comment about Hungarian Jews, there was a gentleman that came to South Africa last year that was the head, what's the Hungarian fascist party? Jobbik. Jobbik. And his enemies within the party did some research on him and found that he was Jewish. He headed the fascist anti-Semitic party Jobbik in Hungary. He was going to I think he had aspirations of becoming the Prime Minister of Hungary, until they found that he was a Jew. He then confronted his mother and said, "Mom, what's going on here? Why didn't you tell us?" She said, "You know, it was the times of the Holocaust. I married your father and we didn't want to say that we were Jewish, but in fact you're halachically Jewish." He did teshuvah, and he's now wearing a kippah full time. He's in learning, and he's returned to his Jewish people. So you can head up a fascist, anti-Semitic organization and land up a From Jew. So these are the complexities of Jewish history. I hope you found it interesting. If you want to come and talk to me privately, bevakasha. If you want to be in touch with me directly, it's hugh@reichlin.co.za, or just look on the Eddie's Kosher Travels webpage and you'll get all our information. Anything else from anyone? One moment.
Just before Roy wraps it up, on behalf of Telfed, just at a technical level, if anyone is interested in our tour next year, which takes place May 10 to 17, that's after Pesach next year, just please register your name and details with my lovely wife Chana at the back there. On behalf of Eddie's Kosher Travel, on behalf of Mizrachi, on behalf of Telfed and Hugh Reichlin, we thank you all for joining us this evening. And lastly, Roy, to wrap it up.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this wonderful evening. While watching this amazing video and listening to the lecture by you, I was thinking about my 4 late grandparents and about my late dad, who passed away a couple of months ago. The Jewish roots that we all grew up with, most of us sitting in this kahal. And I'm grateful that my mom is here with us, and I can talk to my mom and ask lots of questions of those days, because I think it's really struck us all deeply where and what was amazing about the communities of the early 1900s. I could find no better place to have hosted an evening as beautiful as this, as in the Mizrachi building, which teaches Jewish education. So I really want to thank Doran Peretz, David and Chana, you for giving the most amazing tour and insight into what is able to be learned there. And as was mentioned previously, we hosted a talk 2 months ago. My colleague and friend Rose Lera Cohen gave the most amazing talk about Jewish lineage, if that's the right word, I hope. And this is the second in the series, and I see there's a great interest in it, so I think we're going to continue doing more things like this. If anybody, sorry for asking just ex-South Africans or Australians, if you haven't registered, please do so with Lucy, because I'm trying to create a new database. And I want to tell you about our next major, besides the event that's happening in a week's time that was mentioned by Rav Peretz, another event that's happening in the beginning of November. So give me a sec to join it, 1 sec.
Just while Roy is joining you, just to say, there is Michael Pomerantz from Pomerantz Bookstores with some fascinating books about Lithuania, about Sugihara, which is spoken so beautifully about, and some other fascinating books, so they are on sale afterwards. Michael Pomerantz is here at the back with a number of books, 5 or 10 books about Lithuanian Jewry.
Plenty more refreshments.
Okay, our next major event that's coming up at Telfed is on the 8th of November, which actually has been defined as Yom HaAliyah. Sorry about that. Okay, Yom HaAliyah, which is on the 8th of November. We're having a panel discussion, as you see over there, shifting paradigms, professionals who worked in South Africa in the apartheid days and now working in Israel. We've chosen a wonderful list of panelists: journalist Jim Brogrant, a nurse and midwife Pam Patz, Rael Strauss is a professor of psychiatry, accountant Philip Brody, and world-renowned artist Pamela Silva. And our moderator is in the audience with us right here, Rosalind Galtzer, who was previously a presenter on Kol Israel English programs. As a teenager, I used to listen to her every evening. So you're all welcome. It's a great evening. And in the name of Telfed, who I represent as the chairman in Jerusalem, I thank you for joining us again. Please join further at our next events. And again, if anybody wants to sign up, please ask Lucy at the end. Laila Tov and Brachat Shana Tova to Am Israel.